For decades, diesel engines were synonymous with efficiency, durability, and power. They dominated highways, transported millions of people, and moved entire industries. But today, their future is uncertain. Manufacturers are making drastic decisions, regulations are changing rapidly, and the automotive landscape is not what it used to be. What is happening to the diesel? Are we seeing the beginning of the end? Stay to the end to learn why we are in the last days of this technology. The diesel engine is one of the most important creations of mechanical engineering. But how does it work? The operation is based on a key principle: self-ignition of the fuel at high pressure. Unlike gasoline engines, which need a spark to ignite the fuel-air mixture, diesel engines take advantage of high compression to generate the necessary heat and cause the diesel to ignite on its own. But how exactly does this process happen? Let's break it down. It all starts with the intake phase. The piston descends into the cylinder, allowing pure air to enter the combustion chamber. This is where we already find the first big difference with a gasoline engine. There is no mixture of air and fuel beforehand, only air. Then comes the compression phase. As the piston rises, the air is compressed in an extreme way, reaching temperatures that can exceed 500 degrees Celsius. This compression level is much higher than in a gasoline engine, which improves efficiency and allows the diesel to ignite without spark plugs, although some have glow plugs. It is in the combustion phase where the magic happens. Just when the air is at its hottest, the injectors spray diesel into the combustion chamber at extremely high pressures, sometimes exceeding 30,000 psi. Because the air is so hot, the fuel ignites instantly, generating a controlled explosion that pushes the piston down with impressive force. This is the phase that generates the energy needed to move the vehicle. Finally, we have the exhaust phase. The piston rises again, expelling the combustion gases through the exhaust valve to be eliminated by the exhaust system and modern catalytic converters. Thanks to their high torque, which is generated from low revolutions, these engines can move large loads without the need to turn at high RPM, making them ideal for trucks, heavy machinery, and off-road vehicles. Another great advantage is their thermal efficiency. Since the compression ratio is higher than in gasoline engines, diesels make better use of the fuel's energy, achieving much lower fuel consumption. As a result, diesel cars can cover enormous distances on a single tank of fuel. All the benefits of this engine called into question the oil industry, and because of this, Rudolf Diesel, its creator, would meet a tragic end. Rudolf Diesel was born in Paris, France, in 1858, into a family of German immigrants. From an early age, he showed a keen interest in mechanics and engineering. His family moved to Germany, and there he studied at the prestigious Technical University of Munich, where he became a disciple of Carl von Linde, a pioneer in industrial refrigeration. Diesel was an ambitious young man, with a clear idea: to improve the engines of his time. At that time, the steam engine and the internal combustion engine dominated the industry, but both were inefficient. Gasoline engines wasted a lot of fuel, and steam engines were huge and heavy. Diesel dreamed of an engine that would make better use of the energy contained in the fuel. And so he began to develop a new concept that would change the future of engineering. At the end of the 19th century, he would begin work on his revolutionary design. Unlike gasoline engines, his engine did not need a spark to ignite the fuel. Instead, it used extreme compression to heat the air inside the cylinder to extremely high temperatures, enough for the fuel to ignite spontaneously when injected. This process, known as compression ignition, made its engine far more efficient than those of its time. It consumed less fuel, generated more power, and ran on cheaper oils than gasoline. In 1892, Rudolf Diesel patented his invention, and in 1897, he presented his first working prototype to the world. Unlike gasoline engines, which had efficiencies of only 10 to 15%, his engine could reach 40% efficiency, which was impressive for the time. Companies around the world became interested in its technology. His engines began to be used in ships, factories, and electric generators. He would soon become an influential man and a millionaire. But not everything in his life would be successful. Despite his genius, he was not a good businessman. He faced financial and legal problems with companies trying to appropriate his technology. His engine was too innovative, and many in the oil and gasoline industry saw his invention as a threat to their dominance. And it was so amazing. This engine could run on vegetable oil, which meant that in the future farmers could produce their own fuel without relying on oil. An idea that was too dangerous for some powerful people at the time. Moreover, Diesel suffered from constant health problems. His success had been accompanied by extreme stress and a life full of ups and downs. But none of that could have predicted what was about to happen. On September 29, 1913, Rudolf Diesel boarded the ship Dresden in Antwerp, Belgium, bound for England. He was traveling to attend a meeting with British businessmen interested in using his engine in the Royal Navy. It seemed like a normal trip. Diesel had dinner on board and retired to his cabin at about 10 p.m. He was on his way back to his cabin. But the next day, when the ship's staff came to wake him up, his room was empty. His bed was untouched, his pocket watch and coat were neatly folded on the table, but he had disappeared without a trace. 10 days later, a body was found floating in the North Sea. It was in an advanced state of decomposition, so it could not be identified with certainty. Personal items found on the body led his family to conclude that it was Diesel. But what really happened? Since his disappearance, multiple theories have tried to explain what happened to him. I am going to present you the 4 hypotheses that are handled, and you will say which one convinces you more. Some believe that, overwhelmed by his financial and health problems, Diesel eliminated himself by throwing himself into the sea. However, his trip to England was for promising business, and his actions before disappearing showed no signs of despair. Another theory suggests that Diesel was eliminated by oil interests. His engine posed a danger to the big fossil fuel companies, and his sudden death prevented his invention from advancing any faster. In 1913, Europe was on the brink of World War I. Some historians believe that German agents may have eliminated Diesel to prevent its engines from being used by the British Navy. And finally, a less popular theory says that Diesel faked his death to escape his financial problems and live in anonymity. However, there was never any evidence that he was still alive after his disappearance. To this day, the truth remains a mystery. Despite his death, his engine would continue to evolve and expand into new applications. With the advent of World War I, diesel engines found their way onto ships and submarines, where their efficiency and durability made them indispensable. In the post-war period, they began to be adopted in locomotives, reducing dependence on coal and increasing the efficiency of rail transport. In the 1930s, the development of fuel injection systems improved the power and reliability of diesel engines, allowing their use in trucks and agricultural machinery. During World War II, its use expanded even further, with tanks, ships, and military vehicles powered by this technology. After the war, the diesel engine established itself as the best choice for cargo vehicles and public transport. Direct injection, introduced in the 1950s, further improved efficiency and performance, allowing trucks and buses to travel longer distances on less fuel. However, in the automotive sector, diesel was still seen as a technology exclusive to heavy machinery. It was not until the late 1960s that European manufacturers, led by Mercedes-Benz and Peugeot, began experimenting with diesel engines in passenger cars. In 1973, the oil crisis sent fuel prices soaring, causing consumers to look for more efficient alternatives. It was then that diesel engines began to gain popularity in automobiles, and it was at this time that the world's toughest engine, considered by many to be the world's toughest, was born. We are talking about the Mercedes-Benz OM617, a 3-liter inline 5-cylinder engine, recognized for its ability to travel more than 1 million kilometers without major repairs. But why was it so resistant? This engine was born in the 1970s, at a time when Mercedes-Benz was looking for a mechanic that offered more power than the 4-cylinder OM616, without sacrificing the durability that characterized the brand. Thus, in 1974, the OM617 was introduced in the Mercedes-Benz 300D, a sedan that quickly became a favorite of cab drivers and drivers looking for a virtually indestructible vehicle. Throughout its production, it had several versions. The first, naturally aspirated, offered power outputs between 77 and 88 horsepower, sufficient for stable and efficient performance. However, in 1978, Mercedes-Benz introduced a turbocharged variant, raising power to 125 horsepower and significantly improving performance. This was the first series-produced turbo-diesel engine for a luxury car, making the 300 SD the benchmark in the segment. The key to its success lay in its construction. Its cast iron block was extremely strong, and the aluminum alloy cylinder head helped dissipate heat efficiently. Its Bosch mechanical injection system, unlike modern electronic systems, was simple, reliable and could run smoothly on low-quality fuels. In addition, its lubrication and cooling design was intended to reduce wear to a minimum, allowing the engine to work under extreme conditions for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The mechanical simplicity of the OM617 made it an easy engine to maintain and repair. Its mechanical injection pump did not depend on electronic sensors, its cooling system was robust, and the engine's low operating speed considerably reduced internal wear. These factors made it a favorite of those seeking absolute reliability. But despite its durability, it was eventually discontinued in 1985, replaced by more modern and efficient engines. Continuing the evolution of diesel engines, manufacturers quickly improved technology to reduce noise and vibration, two of the main drawbacks of diesel. In the 1980s, the introduction of the turbodiesel marked a turning point, increasing the power and efficiency of these engines, making them more attractive to drivers. Brands such as Volkswagen, Peugeot, and BMW bet on this technology, making diesel cars account for up to 50% of sales in some European countries. As environmental regulations tightened, the automotive industry worked to make diesel engines cleaner and more efficient. In the 1990s, the addition of common rail injectors improved fuel efficiency and reduced noise, bringing diesel performance closer to that of gasoline engines. In the 2000s, particulate filters, DPFs, and oxides of nitrogen reduction, SCR, systems helped to reduce pollutant emissions. The diesel became the preferred choice for those seeking fuel economy without sacrificing power. But in 2015, everything changed with the Dieselgate. In September 2015, the automotive world suffered one of the biggest scandals in its history. A revelation that not only cost billions of dollars to one of the largest companies in the sector, but also called into question the credibility of the entire industry. It was Dieselgate, the Volkswagen emissions fraud. But how did Volkswagen manage to deceive everyone with its engines? To understand Dieselgate, one has to go back to the 2000s, when Volkswagen made a strong commitment to diesel engines. At that time, the automotive industry was under pressure to produce more efficient vehicles with lower emissions. Diesel engines were the ideal solution. They consumed less fuel and emitted less carbon dioxide than gasoline engines. However, there was a problem. Although diesels reduced CO2 emissions, they generated much higher amounts of nitrogen oxides, a group of gases that are highly harmful to health and the environment. In Europe, where diesels were very popular, emission limits were less stringent. But in the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency and the California Air Resources Board had much tougher regulations. To capture the U.S. market, Volkswagen needed to make diesel engines that met those regulations without sacrificing performance or fuel economy. And this is where the fraud begins. Volkswagen engineers were faced with a dilemma. Making their engines comply with strict U.S. regulations without losing power or increasing production costs was extremely difficult. So, instead of finding a real solution, they came up with a software trick. A secret program was developed within the engine management system that could detect when the car was undergoing an emissions test in a laboratory. The software identified whether the vehicle was on a test bench through data such as steering wheel position, speed, test duration, and atmospheric pressure. If the car detected that it was on a test, it activated a special low emissions mode, drastically reducing the amount of nitrogen oxides released from the exhaust. But once the vehicle was back on the road, the system deactivated the test mode and the engine returned to normal operation, emitting up to 40 times more nitrogen oxides than allowed by law. Volkswagen sold its cars as clean diesels and promoted them as an environmentally friendly alternative to gasoline and hybrid engines. In total, more than 11 million vehicles worldwide were equipped with this fraudulent software. The fraud might have remained hidden for years if not for a small group of researchers at West Virginia University. In 2014, a team of scientists was conducting independent tests on diesel cars on the road to measure their actual emissions. To their surprise, Volkswagen diesels showed much higher NOx levels than allowed, something that made no sense, since in laboratory tests they complied with the standards. The investigators reported their findings to the EPA and CARB, which triggered a deeper investigation. In September 2015, Volkswagen had no choice but to admit the truth. It had installed fraudulent software in millions of cars to manipulate emissions tests. The news exploded in the media and the outrage was immediate. Volkswagen's stock value fell by more than 30% in a few days, and the company was forced to face unprecedented legal and financial consequences. It was soon discovered that other brands, such as Audi, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW, were also involved in similar manipulations. The scandal became a global problem, shaking confidence in the automotive industry. The repercussions were devastating for Volkswagen. The company had to pay more than $30 billion in fines, compensation, and legal costs around the world. In the United States, the company was ordered to buy back or repair the affected cars, costing billions more. Volkswagen's CEO at the time, Martin Winterkorn, resigned days after the scandal broke. Several high-level executives were arrested or faced fraud charges, and some were even sentenced to prison. Today, almost a decade after the scandal, Dieselgate is still remembered as one of the biggest corporate shenanigans in history, and the beginning of the end for diesel engines. For decades, diesel engines were the preferred choice in many markets, dominating the commercial vehicle, freight transport, and, in Europe, even passenger car segments. In recent years, however, their future has become increasingly uncertain. With the advance of electric vehicles, the tightening of environmental regulations, and the impact of Dieselgate, many are asking, are we seeing the end of diesel engines? To understand its possible extinction, we must first discuss the challenges facing this technology. Environmental regulations have tightened dramatically in recent years, especially in Europe, where regulations such as Euro 6 and the future Euro 7 impose increasingly stringent limits on emissions of nitrogen oxides and particulate pollutants. This has forced manufacturers to develop increasingly complex systems to reduce pollution, such as particulate filters, urea injection systems, AdBlue, and advanced catalytic converters, which has increased the production cost of diesel engines. Added to this is the change in consumer preferences. Following the Dieselgate, confidence in diesel engines plummeted, leading to a decline in their sales. In Europe, where more than 50% of new cars sold were diesels in 2015, they now represent less than 15% of the market. In countries such as France and Germany, driving restrictions for diesel vehicles have been implemented in certain cities, which has further driven the abandonment of this technology. On the other hand, electrification is advancing rapidly. Manufacturers are investing billions in developing electric and hybrid vehicles, and many have decided to phase out diesel engines from their ranges. Brands such as Volvo, Jaguar, Fiat, and Honda have already announced that they will stop producing diesel engines in the coming years, focusing entirely on electrification. However, this does not mean that diesel is going to disappear completely. Although its presence in passenger cars is in decline, it remains a key technology in heavy transport, agricultural machinery, and the maritime industry. Its efficiency and range remain unmatched in applications where electrification is not yet feasible. In long-haul trucking, for example, diesel engines can travel more than 1,500 kilometers on a single tank of fuel, something that electrics cannot yet match without major sacrifices in weight and cost. In addition, research into synthetic fuels and biofuels could give it a second life. Companies like Porsche and Bosch are exploring e-fuels and advanced biodiesel, fuels that significantly reduce CO2 emissions and allow combustion engines to be more sustainable. So, are diesel engines in danger of extinction? In the passenger car segment, the answer is yes. With new regulations, falling sales, and electrification on the rise, it is a matter of time before diesel engines disappear completely from this market. However, in sectors such as freight transport, heavy machinery, and industry, diesel still has a considerable lifespan.